Hey everyone, welcome back to OTD Military History for another live stream. So today we have one of our own on, which is extremely exciting to have, again, one of our own, one of our sidebar warriors, whatever you guys want to, we've decided to call ourselves, have on here and talk about a story that is obviously going to have, as you'll see, a very personal connection. We were supposed to have another live stream this afternoon. Unfortunately, with Dave Patterson, we have to push that back. I'm not sure when that will be, but I'll let everybody know as much as we can. And other than that, I think I'm coming down with some sort of head cold, maybe allergies. Who knows this time of year? So if I sound funny, that's why. If I have to pull out Kleenexes or whatever, that's why I sound weird. But Dave, our guest today, Dave LaVigne, will be doing most of the talking. And I think questions are good as we go along because there's quite a bit of information in here in the best way possible. So we'll get kicked off here. So Dave, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you coming on and sharing this story and all of this research that's gone into this.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. And it's an honor to be here presenting on your channel, Brad, and to share this with my fellow live chat warriors. It's interacted with many of you, and in the comments, you know, if you see me, I always leave copious comments after I watch any live stream. So
yeah,
you're all wonderful people. I call you my lovely bunch of coconuts.
I think that's a fair title for us. So as you know, as the audience knows, I usually ask, what's going on here, why this project or what have you, but you've taken care of that in the presentation itself. So I think we should just get going.
Sure, I can kind of tell the story of how it came about that way. That's good. We'll save.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it here because you've seen my presentation, so you know how they go.
I'm going to start this with my favorite line from one of my favorite war movies. I love old war movies. Everyone's seen A Bridge Too Far, and if you haven't, in the opening scenes, there's the actor portraying General Horrocks, and he says to the gathered officers from the 30th Corps, "Today I'll tell you a story you'll tell your grandchildren about. And mightily bold they'll be." I hope not to do that. We'll give it a good run anyway. So we've got a lot of slides, so we're going to try to move along like an 18-knot depth charge attack here. So general quarters, man your battle station.
Dave, we're having some audio issues. You said you had another microphone, right?
So let me try taking this off. Let's see. The mic. Are you hearing me now?
Is that better, everybody? Just let me
because I've got the mic from my camera on.
That sounds better to me.
Okay, great.
My ears are kind of plugged, so I don't know if it's right.
Get rid of this.
But I think that sounds better. People.
Wonderful.
It sounds better to me.
Now you can see my beautiful ears.
Yeah, there we go. It sounds much better. There we go. All right, we're good. Let's go.
Here's my title page. I've got the vessel that my grandfather served on in the upper left, and that's a picture taken by someone in my family. And then this was in a newspaper article I received from my mother some time back. And below left, you see the results of the Granville Raid on that fateful night. So if we can go on to the next one, please. All right, I want to dedicate this to the memory of Joseph LaCroix. I'll try to use the French pronunciation and not butcher them too badly. And also to the memory of all those fallen on the Allied side, French and U.S. sailors in the Granville Raid. Now, the former sailors of patrol craft and all small ship sailors, they were known as the Donald Duck Navy. And the main author I learned about these ships was that man in below, the late William Veigele, author of those two books, which I'm going to read some selections from a sea bag full of memories today. To my cousin, Paul Chenevert, who did the original research into Lucien Laqua, to Miss Lorelei Comm and her Papa Russ, who was a former sailor aboard SC-686, and to the memory of all those who served in the war. If you could go on, please. All right, now, Lorelei, I saw a comment you made about a year ago. I don't forget what live stream. And I saw you had mentioned your Papa Russ and how he had served in the Navy in the Pacific. And I saw the name of your ship, SC-686. While doing the research for this, when I was looking at the various war diaries along the eastern coast of the United States, I kept seeing that hull number pop up. So she was often operating in the same area that my grandfather's ship was operating, all the way from the eastern, like New York. I would see her name pop up along the coast of Georgia or Florida, and sometimes in the Gulf. So that little ship got around. And to the left, you mentioned that she went on the rocks in a typhoon. Well, that's the picture I found. And on the left, that's Iwo Jima, or Okinawa, I beg your pardon. And that little yellow sticky there up in the upper right says, "This is our island, Tsukenjima." That's about where she went aground. So thought I'd include that in there for everyone to see. As we know, Lorelei Com as our regimental sergeant major. So I'm giving my due respect. Forward, please. These are the specifications of that ship. She's smaller than the PC that we're going to talk about today by about 63 feet. All right, not much less in the beam. Her crew complement was only 28, and her armament, I'm not going to read all this and bore you to death with statistics, but she really had only one difference in her armament. Instead of 50 cal machine guns, she had 20 millimeter guns, and she had a 3-inch gun forward. All right. Forward, please. And
yeah, I just going to give it.
Read those at your leisure on the replay if you want.
Yeah, I just want to give this another second so people have a chance to pause.
Sure.
There we go.
That's a little drawing I found online, okay, from the navsource.org, to give you an idea of how small these vessels were internally. Now, this SC was only only 2 decks, an upper and lower deck. Wow. And then, of course, the bridge in the center with the flying bridge above. So you can see how small that is, and that's only about 28 people aboard that ship. So if we could move forward, please.
Sounds roomy in comparison to the Corvettes, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah, the Corvette is kind of where they got the idea from. So, yeah. All right, here's a picture. My inspiration: a family mystery solved. Since I was a little boy, from about 8, I once looked at my mother and father's marriage certificate, and I noticed that my mother's mother, her name was Kessler, her last name. We call her Meme Kessler. Well, what happened was I saw my mother's maiden name was Laqua. And I said, that's strange. So I asked my mother, why is your mother's name different than yours? And she said, well, my father died in the war. And I said, well, how? And she said, I don't know. It was off the coast of Normandy. So that's all we ever knew. So in my mind's eye, as a young man, I thought, well, he was killed in the Operation Neptune, maybe aboard one of those LSTs or LCTs. Yeah. Well, lo and behold, man, my cousin wondered the same thing for years. So he finally started to investigate it. And he dug deep for about 5 years. And this was before the internet had all these digital. And he was able to put together a display and have it in the Springfield Museum for about a month or so. And that's how we found out the real story, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story. So it was really, we owe a great debt to my cousin Paul. So I've taken the research that he shared with me, and I've moved forward because I want to tell a broader story. All right, we're ready when you are. If I'm going too fast, let me know.
Yeah, that seems so good so far.
All right, this one I put in there just to tell a little bit about him. There's his Marine Corps. He's your typical Marine. He's really they say no Marines ever retire. He's basically a former Marine, and he was proud. He did 8 years service. He was a combat vet. Then he moved home to Agawam, Massachusetts, which is not far from where my grandfather grew up, or where he moved to Massachusetts. And he's a passionate enthusiast, just like my brothers and I are, about military history. We've all served in the military. And he's dedicated years of his life to this research. So I just wanted to honor him. To the right, you see the emblem of the patrol craft sailors, which is the Donald Duck Navy. And they adopted that as their unofficial emblem. Now, often they would sew it to their uniform, even though it was not a regulation. So that young man there on the right, lower right, that was a signalman, James Dickey. He painted that image on the bulkhead of 564.
Wow.
And there's a view of the very elegant lines of the patrol craft. I think they were beautiful little ships.
Definitely.
Okay, this here, we're not going to spend too much time, but these are types of the various original source documents. The ones that have a sheen on them with the American flag there, Paul took, he's afraid to take them out of the protective plastic because they're so valuable to our family.
Right.
He took these pictures and sent them to me, and I cut and pasted them into here. So you have copies of his military records below there. That I actually have that digital one below on the left. That's the actual report of his missing in action and where they discovered his body at sea. Down in the lower middle, that's a type of letter that he got from some of the family members of the former veterans, enhancing the story. Then above, of course, photos I got. You're going to see a lot of photos throughout this. And then that man in the upper right, Stanley Cusick, is a man that Paul met with who was a shipmate of my grandfather's. He was also from Massachusetts, in Springfield, just over the river from where my grandfather grew up. And they instantly became buddies. And he shared a whole cigar box full of old photos that he took during the war. So you're going to see some of those photos today. And then below right, if anyone wants to go to this website, fold3.com, you can, it's a great website. It's very inexpensive, and you can download records from the National Archives. They have
very cool.
They finally started digitizing most of everything.
Very cool.
All right. I
can link that afterwards.
So we're going to start, like all good sea stories, they start on land, right? Here, that's a handsome young man up in the upper left corner. That is my arrière-grand-père, my great-grandfather. His name was Alexis Joseph Laqua. He was born in Quebec, Canada in 1879. That's 100 years before I went in the military. He immigrated to the U.S. in 1926. In the Roaring 20s, there was a lot of work in the United States, and Canada was kind of having an economic crisis. So a lot of Canadians moved south over the border. And then he moved with two of his young children from his second marriage, my great aunt Yvonne, who we called Auntie Shorty, and there's my grandfather, Lucien, at age 14. This is from the 1930 census. All right. And he worked for, as you see, for the Holyoke hydroelectric power plant.
Right, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Given the area, makes perfect.
My mother loved him dearly. He was a great. I never got to meet him though. Okay, so here's just a little example of, so you get an idea of people who've never been to northeast New England. There's Holyoke in the state of Massachusetts. That's where I grew up. I grew up in a little town just east of Springfield called Ludlow. And then Holyoke was established long ago in 1655, and it was named after that guy there, Eliza Holyoke. All right. Around the 1880s, during the Industrial Revolution, it became a manufacturing city, mainly with textiles and paper, and was called the Paper City. All right. And they also had cotton mills as well. And it still uses hydroelectric power to this day, which is the most efficient way to provide power. And so just so you get an idea where the area was that he moved to. Okay, next, please, when you're ready. That is just an image I found online around the same time that my grandfather had moved, or my great-grandfather moved with his family there. And my mother tells me that those trolleys weren't in existence when I was in the 1960s, but I still remember seeing trolleys. But so if I'm wrong, Mother, I apologize. But anyway, that's kind of Holyoke still looks a lot like that today. You can see that pre-industrial kind of beginning of the industrial age type of architecture.
I was going to say, sorry to jump in here, but it looks like the area I grew up in Southern Ontario, every small town looks almost like this.
Exactly. That's a typical New England city or town.
Yeah, they all sort of look like this.
Right. In the background is the beautiful Holyoke mountain range. If you want to come skiing, that's a great place to go in the winter.
Cool.
There's the earliest picture I have of the Laqua family. Now, the three nuns in the upper part of that picture, that's my great-grandfather in the middle. He had his first wife, he had three daughters. And for some reason, they all decided to become nuns in Canada, in Quebec. Yeah.
Hmm.
And so then she died. I don't know what from, some kind of illness, I think. And he remarried, and those are his children from his second marriage below. The older, handsome young man to the left there with the child in his lap, that's my great uncle Romeo. And then his wife and his older son to his left. The young man in the right foreground, that is my grandfather at age 14.
Wow.
Lucien, and then there's Yvonne to his left. So thought it would give you an idea of the era,
Yeah, that's amazing.
So these early family photos.
Yep, that's amazing.
All right, now there's a biographical data of my grandfather. So it shows when he was born in Canada, raised as a devout Catholic. When he moved to Holyoke, he immigrated there. He married my grandmother, Rose Yvonne Marie Quinville, in 1937. All right.
Sorry, that's got to be one of the most Quebecois names I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, yeah. And she literally was a next door neighbor in the next apartment. So
Wow, really? Okay. Yeah, shouldn't be surprised, I guess.
They had 3 children from that marriage, and that was my mother, Janet. Well, I'll say Jeanette, Ramon, and Carol. Now, they don't pronounce it that way, trust me. All right. Notice he worked for $15 a week. Well, his rent was just a little bit more than that per month. So they were surviving on about $60 a month, which in 1940s, that wasn't too bad.
Not too bad.
Shows when he joined the U.S. Navy Reserve. Okay. He transferred to England in May. He didn't report to the vessel until 15 September. We're going to see that. And then he was killed in action on 9th of March. All right, now, this is the first document on the left that my cousin Paul received when he wrote to the National Personal Record Center.
Right.
And they sent him a certificate showing the service time of my grandfather and the date that he died. So that was the first inkling we had of his service,
right,
and that it was official. To the right, I have this document in my possession. My mother gave it to me, and I took a picture of that. That's the actual Western Union telegram my grandmother received when his status was changed from MIA to KIA. So it's a very important family document to us. Hope everyone's enjoying this because I'm enjoying telling the story. Now, here his registered. Everyone had to register for the draft in 1940 in the U.S. I don't know how it was in Canada. But
same thing. Not exactly, but you had to register for the national service. Doesn't mean you were going to get conscripted, though.
Right. So there it shows on the left. I highlighted his height. He was not very tall, 5'4".
Pretty common.
But for that back then, there were not a lot of people were as tall. 150 pounds. All right, and it shows his hair brown, ruddy complexion, and he had brown eyes. Now, over on the right, I wanted to point out that's his induction paperwork he made out when he was inducted in the Navy. All right, citizen of Canada.
Yep.
We always thought that he was an American citizen, as he'd been living in the country for 18 years.
Right.
But he never became a citizen.
Yep.
And I looked on the 1940 census, and he's listed as an alien, along with his aunt, my great aunt. Notice the beautiful handwriting on the bottom. That's his signature.
That's pretty good.
My mother has the very same handwriting.
Oh, really?
I wish I could write that well.
Yeah, me too.
So,
and yes, people are enjoying it. So.
Wonderful! I'm glad they are.
Great to hear that.
Thank you, Susan. All right.
I'm loving this. This is warming my historian heart with all these documents. That's for sure.
Okay, these are, you can't read very well, I'm sure, on the screen, but I'll go from left to right. That's just showing that where he signed up in Holyoke, Massachusetts, and took his oath. The one in the center left, I highlighted where it says citizen of Great Britain.
Yes.
Canada was a dominion, right, at that time?
It's technically correct, yep.
Right. He only had a 10th grade in education.
Also common.
A lot of people in the 40s and 30s, that's about as high as many of them went.
It's pretty high, actually,
right?
Considering.
And then to the right, I've highlighted the information showing where the very next day he was shipped off to his basic training station in U.S. Naval Training Center in Sampson, New York. So that's not far from the border there from Canada. All right. So whenever you're ready, we can move on. I included this so you can get an idea where he trained at. All right, that's USNTS Sampson off the beautiful Lake Seneca. I'm sure my grandfather spent a little time rowing boats during small boat handling practice. And it was established in 1942 and named after that Admiral William T. Sampson, the victor of the Battle of Santiago. And there's some pictures just kind of giving you an idea, a flavor of reporting up on the left. You'll be sorry, you're a new recruit. Firing range, their drill instructors, mess hall.
Yeah.
Laundry day, every day is Monday. I love that one.
Yeah.
And then everyone who's ever been in the military can identify with that inspection photo. I had many of those in my 41 years service.
Yeah, no kidding, eh?
Yeah.
Some things never change, eh?
So he wasn't, now, by this time in 44, basic training has been reduced from probably 9 weeks to 8, and then it went down to eventually about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So he graduated as a seaman second class, and that's him, that arrow, that's him. That's his graduation photograph, so that's his class. All right. So afterwards, he was given a leave or a pass, we're not sure, to go to Holyoke on his way to New York Naval Yard. He was supposed to report on the 11th. All right. We'll see what happened there. Didn't quite work out. So this is the last known photograph, the last time my grandmother, my mother, aunt, and uncle saw my grandfather. He's on leave. This was taken in April when he went on that leave. And I put their titles in French, but interestingly enough, my great-grandmother was always after my grandmother why she didn't teach my mother and my aunt and uncle French. It's because
I know why.
My grandfather, when he moved from Canada, he still spoke English with a very strong accent.
Yeah.
And my great-grandfather insisted that he go to a Catholic school. Well, the only Catholic school in Holyoke, Massachusetts, was Irish. So imagine a boy speaking French accent at 14 showing up in a school with Irish 14-year-olds.
It sounds like a recipe for a lot of fights.
Yes, and because of that, my grandfather became a very good fighter and also a good wrestler. And he became very athletic. So it may have benefited him in some ways, but that experience made him insist that my grandmother had my mother, uncle, and aunt speak English only.
Yeah.
So he was afraid they would go through what he went through in school.
Yep, same thing happened to my father.
So that picture of my mother says, "Mara, you see that face? That's the same face I would usually see right before I was being scolded." I love you, Mom.
There's a lot of similarities here, I think, between our families.
Oh,
More than one way.
These documents from left to right are some of his military record, so we can kind of see the transition. This is him being the order on the left, him being transferred from basic training to report to the New York Navy Yard. The one to the right of that was a copy of a summary court-martial he received for a lie. He came back almost 6 days late.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He just didn't want to go. He knew he was going overseas. He didn't want to leave his family. Well, because he was a good sailor, he had a good record, and he threw himself at the mercy of the court and just pleaded guilty. They decided to remit those charges, which is a delay for 6 months on condition that he would be a good boy. So if he got any kind of a bad report from a CO, they would have immediately given him a bad conduct discharge.
Yeah.
But they had to slap him on the hand some way, so they charged his pay for 4 months for about $15 a month. So my grandmother probably didn't like that. She's stuck raising 3 children back at home. She didn't want him to go in the Navy at all, but he decided to go in because it was better than being drafted into the infantry, which is probably what would have happened. All right. And he also liked to swim, so he figured, well, if I got to be in a service, I want to go into the Navy. To the right of that, that's his transfer order from receiving station New York to being sent overseas. On the 5th of May, he reported into Naval Operating Base Londonderry, England. And then from there, on the 10th of June, transferred to the U.S. Navy Amphibious Base in Falmouth. Now, it says he was there on LST gun crews. I see that on a lot of orders for people going overseas, Navy personnel enlisted. And I think what they try to do is train as many of these men as possible as gunners. His rating was Seaman First Class eventually, but which is like a deckhand. But I think they tried to train everyone to operate guns. So I think everybody probably went through some kind of schooling in England before they reported aboard a ship.
That makes sense. Yeah. That's
my theory anyway. I'm still looking for what the heck LST gun crews means.
Yeah, I mean, there's no standardization there. So. And
to the right is when he left from that training and was transferred to Task Force 129, which was the task force that PC 564 was in. And this is in August, just before he joined the ship. So that kind of tells how he got to this point in the war. All right. This is an example I put in here of the actual, what they call muster rolls. And I got these I literally have every muster roll that the ship had since the day she was commissioned, 2 July 1942 until just after the end of the war. And it's fascinating because these records say when a person reported board, when they were promoted, if they were disrated, if they left the ship to go to a hospital and they came back. It's very detailed.
Yep.
And I'm eventually going to put together a comprehensive spreadsheet, which will document every year of the war. So when I write the book, I'll have these in an appendix so I can share that with any potential family members out there that want to trace a relative or an ancestor.
Yeah, that's great.
The one on the left, they're highlighted in blue. That's the day that my grandfather reported in Dartmouth, England. All right, on the 15th of September. There's his name, his rating, and his service number. Now, I have some names. The one above him in the light gray is Stanley Cusick. He went aboard PC 564 on the 9th of March, just prior to her deploying overseas. And that's a story I hope to tell another day. She helped escort a very valuable convoy of barges in a large task force that was those barges were destined to use in Operation Overlord to shipping across, big, I'm talking about big railroad car barges with barges on top of them.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting story.
Wow.
All the yellow highlighted names are men who've been aboard that ship. Now, this is September 44. Some of these men had been aboard that ship since commissioning day.
Wow.
So, or very soon. So those are what we call plank owners in the Navy. They're like your original crew. So that's a long time service aboard a ship.
Yep.
All right. And then to the right, that one on the right shows what they call reports of changes. These were done quarterly, and then they would attach these reports of changes, which would detail the information of who's coming, going, the reason why, whatever. So if you're ever interested if you do any research on the Navy, this is how you track personnel aboard from ship to ship. All right.
Do you want me to go forward?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Sorry, I'm just reading just lots of information. My historian, I can't stop it.
Well, I'm glad that you. I put a lot of slides in here. I hope I have not bored everyone, but
no, we're moving
I need to go back later and they can teach themselves a little bit. Patrol craft 564. That's what she looks. You can see she was 63 feet longer than the SE. She was also considered a sub chaser. The difference was she was all metal.
Right.
As the opposed to the SC class, which was wood. All right. Her draft was very shallow, only not quite 11 feet, and that's fully loaded at 450 tons. Her top speed was really about 18 knots, but in an emergency, she could get up to 20 knots or more for short periods. You can see her crew was very small, 5 officers and 60 enlisted. And the only main difference in her armament, like I said, she has the 1 3-inch gun forward there.
Yep.
They moved the 40 millimeter gun aft of the funnel, and there were 2 depth charge racks, I think 4K or Y projectors, and the 2 mouse traps. Now, the mouse traps were kind of like the American early version of the British Hedgehog.
Yep.
But instead of firing a huge number of these mortar bombs, it only fired 8 at a time. All right, and then I want to say something about the Fairbanks Morse diesel engines.
Sure.
Because those were in high demand because the submarines in the U.S. Navy used the same engines. So there was always this constant competition.
Yeah.
And at one point, they contemplated trying to make the PC class steam turbine generated.
Right.
But her ability to store water was too small, and it just didn't work out well. So
that makes sense.
So they decided to go ahead and stick with the diesels. So there's a little bit for people like me who are, a little bit nerdy on statistics.
Yeah, gotta get that naval tech in there.
All right. Now here I found this PC 564 chronology at that NavSource website down on the bottom. All right. Notice how quick from her launching to her commissioning, her keel was laid down on the 25th of January. Not even 3 months later, she's launched.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
And commissioned in July after they fitted her out. All right. And that what you're going to read, that middle paragraph, that's the official chronology. That's all you can find in most official histories. And it says that she engaged these 4 minesweepers and 9 smaller craft off Chaussee, France. And she was badly outgunned. Well, she was. And damaged and outran the force. Well, they make it seem like she took on the entire Kriegsmarine, but it was actually just 3 vessels. But those 3 vessels, as you'll see, were very deadly. All right. And then finally, she was basically went back to the Naval Reserve in Pearl Harbor. They finally gave these ships names.
Yeah.
They were unrated vessels. I kind of think of them as like the 19th century equivalent would have been like a brig of war or a small sloop of war.
Yeah.
All right. But they were unrated, and they were all commanded by lieutenants. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is a brig would have been a similar type of ship commanded by an officer in those days.
Yeah.
So there's my reference to wooden ships and sailing men. I love that period.
There we go.
Okay. And finally, she was decommissioned and not decommissioned, but transferred to the South Korean Navy in 1964. And she became Seoraksan, PC 709. And then finally they decommissioned the old girl, and then in 1974, fate unknown. So whenever you're ready. There's the PC 564. Now I wanted to include this because on the bottom line, that's basically all you can find in the official histories about that ship, is that Granville Raid. But you can see there's many other operations and jobs that she did from the time she was launched. And I'm not going to go into all of them, but let's say for the first 18, 19 months, she was convoying very valuable convoys. Y'all heard of Operation Alkenschlag, maybe? That was when the German U-boats first started attacking shipping off the coast of the U.S. That's the reason these vessels were made, because we were getting slaughtered off our own coast, literally within miles of the cities sometimes, because we had no convoys and because we didn't have enough ships to provide convoys. And then there was resistance to forming convoys.
Yes.
So finally, after the British finally met with Admiral King, and this was in a book by Ted Barris that you did a fine presentation with that man, a Canadian author who wrote about the Canadian efforts in the Battle of the Atlantic.
Yep.
And he mentioned that Canada was getting upset and the UK was getting upset because they were losing ships off our coast that we were supposed to be protecting.
Yep. So
that was a big motivator for why these ships were made. And Then there's that convoy that she escorted across the Atlantic when she went to England. Below that, she's trained up for Operation Neptune. And then on the 6th of June and for the next 3 weeks, she operated as a control vessel. Control vessels were those vessels that would go ahead of the landing craft. And then they would peel off at a certain range, and then they would give gunfire support while the landing craft went aboard. As a matter of fact, the first vessel lost off Utah Beach was a PC that engaged a gun battery and lost after one round. These ships had no armor.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah.
There's a reason they called them Razorbacks.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
So then Operation Neptune, she was there for about the next 3 weeks or so until they kind of declared that officially over, and she served as an ASW screening vessel. And then between the end of Neptune until the time that she was in Granville, she was serving mainly out of Cherbourg, and they were doing patrols all up and down the French coast on the southern part of Normandy. So that's something that I'd love to do a presentation on in the future, telling the whole story.
Yeah, we could definitely do that.
All right. There's a little map showing the main bases that these ships operated out of. The primary one that his task force operated out of was Cherbourg. Then Granville, Saint-Malo, and that little port down in the Saint-Maurice, Saint-Michel, I think that's how you say it, Saint-Michel. Okay, those are the main ports. And there's a little picture that I don't know where Margaret Gins got this picture, but that's my grandfather clowning around with a French civilian, and he was one of the bunkers in Cherbourg. All right. So I don't know where she got that photo. It's priceless to me.
Wow, that's amazing. I couldn't tell you. Yeah.
Right. And during all her patrols out in October, and I have to the right the war diary entries for that highlighted, she was fired on by the guns at Alderney Island. Now, Alderney Island, if you look on my map, where Cherbourg is written, right above the CH in Cherbourg is Alderney Island. And those guns could actually reach out and touch the tip of that peninsula. They were powerful guns. Fortunately, no ships were hurt, but they did patrol around they were trying to keep the Germans from getting any supplies or reinforcements to the Channel Islands. So then we'll move into November and then into December. So whenever you're ready, when folks are ready.
I was having trouble there.
Thank you, James. I appreciate you too. I hope to do an "Oh It Rabbles" for you, because he loves the rabbit holes.
Oh yeah.
Okay, these are pictures. I love these pictures showing just kind of a little bit of the what do you call it, the essence of the era. These were taken by Stanley. There's the low tide at the port of Cherbourg, and then to the left of that is the dockside of Saint-Malo, where she pulled in one time. And you can see the buildings of Saint-Malo are damaged from the fighting that took place there when they were retaking the port.
Yep.
So this isn't very far after those ports were recaptured. There's low tide. I think that's Granville. I'm not 100% sure because there's so many French ports that have that type of mole in their outer harbor.
Right.
But in my mind's eye, I think of it as Granville because she was there frequently.
Yeah.
And that low tide's going to come into play in the raid, you'll see. The one in the lower left is fascinating to me because I was wondering, I said, why are these four men looks like two men dancing? And I said, I enlarged it so I could see better. And I said, men don't usually dance with one another regularly, but if they do, they certainly don't take their shirts off.
Yeah, or next to a pier.
Right? So I said, and I saw that arm raised to the right there. I said, that's a haymaker fixing to get launched.
Looks like it.
So I believe it's two sailors having a fight. You know, maybe someone said, hey, you Donald Duck guy. And said, well, I got one for you.
Yeah. Again, not surprising.
And then the entrance at Saint-Malo, and I don't know where that Napoleonic era fortress is, but I'm loving it. I love that.
Yeah, that's a great one. These are amazing. Yeah, these are fantastic.
Thank you. I apologize to everyone. I do have the names of most of these people in these pictures, but I didn't have time to put them in there before the presentations. I will correct that. The ones to the left, I believe that upper left-hand photo is Lieutenant Sandy Purcell. These were taken after the battle. I know that because the person down there on the bottom labeled Lieutenant Duville, during the fighting, he was an ensign. So he got a promotion. So
Okay.
this is after the fight.
Yeah.
I don't know the name of the officer below Lieutenant Sandell. He's probably the replacement for one of the officers killed. And then Officer Klinger, he was the gunnery officer. That man is going to play a very important role in the fight, as you'll come to see. I apologize for those two. Almost, you can't almost see the people in that photo, so I don't know why I even put them in there. The mascot, that was their mascot. They found this monkey in some French port, and they adopted it. I don't know his name. And there's the different views of the crew. The snipes are your engine room folks. Then, of course, there's your gunner's mates to the upper right. Then below that is is that a howler monkey? I didn't know that. Cooks.
I think
Those are
so.
the cooks and stewards. Now, the stewards are black men, and that's the only way a black sailor could serve in the U.S. Navy in World War II.
Yep.
I'm glad we've corrected that in our country. And then, of course, if you go below that, that is the area around the gun tub. And right forward that is a small boat. I call it a whale boat, but it's probably really more of a launch.
Yeah.
That's the ship's boat. And that's an area you're going to see a picture of that looks a little different than that later on. Then there's an officers on the lower right. That was taken actually in the States.
Okay.
When she got back from when she was in Miami. Then I don't know who the officer is, but I like the picture of that 3-inch gun to his left.
That's a good side profile for sure.
Yeah. And then, okay, that's good. This here on the right, I included these because there's my grandfather. According to my cousin, he talked to Stanley Cusick, and he pointed that out. He's clowning around again. He liked to clown around. And they had just either gotten paid or they were counting their winnings from a card game. And he's reaching, trying to get some of their money. That's how my family has that kind of trait. We have that kind of joking around atmosphere that we liked, especially when I was in the military. We were just like, we're always cutting up. I don't know the names of the gentlemen except for the one in the lower left center. That's Melvin DeWitt. All right. And he's quite a character, that guy. There's one of the stewards with his friend. And then in the center is Mr. Cusick. And I like this picture because it shows the prow of the ship looking aft, and you can see how tight it is. And those are your mousetrap projectors, your rails. You can see it's not a very great distance from prow to flying bridge.
No.
Very narrow. And then the ones to the right, those are all pictures of Stanley Cusick taken by, I'm sure, a shipmate. I just wanted to honor him and remind us how we got these pictures. So, thank you.
That's awesome.
All right. This is right before the end of the year, and this is something you can look up online and find information about, the Leopoldville disaster. That ship is a Belgian passenger liner that had been converted to a troop ship. And they were desperately needing reinforcements for the Battle of the Bulge, as everyone may recall. And so they were shipping over 2,000 soldiers from the 66th Infantry Regiment from England to France. And they were to land at Cherbourg. And what happened was a U-boat sank that ship, U-486, with one torpedo.
Wow.
It took several hours to go down, but think about it. There was an escort of 4 destroyers, but one of them stopped to help rescue sailors and soldiers. The other 3 went in search of the U-boat.
Right.
So they radioed to Cherbourg to send more ships. So they sent about 30 or so small ships, with my grandfather's ship being one of them. And even though they rescued about a total between, now I want to say this about HMS Brilliant. She went back 2 times and rescued 500 soldiers.
Wow.
That's a lot of soldiers she pulled out of the water. Some of them tried to jump from the deck on that ship and were injured in landing because it was very far. They had a big freeboard.
Yep.
So, yeah. Anyway, unfortunately, the Belgian crew abandoned ship, but they forgot to teach these GIs how to do a lifeboat drill.
Yeah.
They were lost in the sauce. They had no chance. So a lot of them jumped in the water and they froze from hypothermia and drowned. So you can see that's on the upper left is your top secret excerpt from the report that was actually typed up by the Navy. And you can see she lost over 800 were killed that night.
Yeah, it's a lot.
The color pictures to the left, Lieutenant Wesley Johnson, who was a lieutenant aboard at the time, he jumped in the water and saved that man. He at the time he was a Royal Navy gunner serving aboard, manning the guns on the Leopoldville, and he was just about to go under when Wesley got to him, and he pulled him out. And Wesley was always trying to get in touch with him, and a newspaper journalist got him in touch with this man, and they exchanged letters. And
that's
I have
amazing.
a copy of those letters, and it's very, very poignant. So, but I didn't have time to go into it too much today.
Yeah, that's okay. Just a quick question. I mean, you might not have the answer, but this, I have no idea. Why are they going into Cherbourg instead of going into Antwerp? Do you know?
I can't remember. Was Antwerp cleared by then, the Scheldt estuary?
Yeah. Yes, it was.
I don't know. It might have been an American transportation issue, maybe. That was where their transportation was. They probably had a whole unit of trucks getting ready to ship these guys.
Well, yeah, they're still using the Red Ball Express.
Right.
So
But that's a good question. I need to look into that more.
I think it's probably to do with the lack of cooperation that went on ahead, and then they still use the Red Ball Express. Right. So anyway,
thanks for the question. That was good.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Okay. So January and February were important, and I put these in there just to remind you about the muster rolls. This is where I discovered this information. But before that, I got to discuss. There's my grandfather in trouble again. He was in Dartmouth they were on a mail run, and he got a Liberty, and of course he stayed out past Liberty hours. So he gets aboard, and his commander at the time was Lieutenant Spencer. Gave him 5 days restrictions. So.
Yeah.
But that was happened a lot with sailors, and it still does in the modern Navy. Sailors just can't help themselves.
Yep. Oh yeah, we talked about that yesterday.
They're young guys. They're away from home. They're going to have some fun, and they don't want it to end. Okay, now the big changes on the right. Lieutenant Percy Sandell replaces Lieutenant Spencer. Now he's brand new from the States, right out of the training school.
Right.
Wesley Johnson, one of the most experienced senior officers, leaves, and he's replaced by Roger Miller. Okay, that fellow Roger Miller in the middle there. Unfortunately, he'll be killed in the battle. Then Ensign Francis Duval reports to replace Ensign Richard Oftedal, who was transferring back to Plymouth. Now, a lot of these men had been on board a long time on this ship, and the Navy was trying to get them some leave and rotate them home. So 18 enlisted ratings were transferred off the ship, and they got 16 almost brand new sailors from either other ships or from the States. So what that means is 30% of the crew is new to this ship, including some of the officers, and 20% are straight from the stateside.
Right.
So keep that in the back of your mind as we go forward.
Is that sorry, just jump in there real quick. Is that common, particularly for this time period? That seems like a big.
I think what they were, the war was kind of winding down.
Yeah,
the Allies knew it was just a matter of time.
Right.
I think the Navy was looking at some of their sailors who had been a long time, aboard these vessels, and they were trying to rotate some new replacements in there before the war ended.
Right.
And they figured, hey, let's put them aboard these ships, and they'll get some training, and we can send some of the old salts home who need a rest.
Yeah, that's my assumption.
That's my guess, anyway.
Yeah, that'd be my assumption based on the time.
Now, this here, we're going to start getting into the Granville Raid. This is a little background. There's the Channel Islands, and those circles represent the range of the various large caliber guns. that the Germans had installed there. Now we all know, I really want to reach out and talk about Phil Merritt, who came from he's does the Jersey bunker tours, and I think Woody had him on talking about the fortifications and the occupation. They had to call it Channel Islands Week. It was very fascinating. But the Germans occupied it since almost the fall of France, the 30th of June. There was no way that the British could resist it. They just couldn't at the time. They were trying to get back to UK, after Dunkirk.
Yeah.
And heavily fortified by Organization Todt. Mainly, they spent more money building concrete shelters, bunkers, and ammunition storage facilities in these islands than they did for the whole rest of the Atlantic Wall.
Yeah.
So they really wanted to hold on to these islands.
Yeah.
All right. They were the most heavily defended part. All right. They were mainly built by slave labor and some paid labor, and also Jews were sent from the mainland over to. So, and it looks like mostly from the Ukraine. A lot of these were captured.
Yeah.
Thank you, James. A lot of these were captured, probably Soviet prisoners. All right. The Germans were trying to show the world this was going to be a model occupation, and they were going to treat the population well, and everything was going to be hunky-dory. All right. The problem was, once all the French ports were captured, they were cut off on the vine, kind of, as they say. They didn't have any supplies coming in, and the only means of communication they had their powerful Kriegsmarine radio transmitter. So they were able to keep in touch with the mainland.
Right.
But by 1945, which was one of the most coldest winters, if you recall, 44, 45, they started to run out of food, medical supplies, and mainly coal.
Right.
Remember that.
Yeah.
Red Cross, there's that ship, SS Veigele. That was the Red Cross ship that would periodically visit, I think it was Guernsey or Jersey, and she would deliver supplies. Now, the Germans were pretty good about not taking their Red Cross packages. That's a fact. All right. They never did pilfer them, and to their credit, I'll give them credit for that. That was a Wehrmacht unit, and their commander insisted that they don't do that. So the Germans suffered too. All right, they were suffering too. Although they did fire on the Veigele once, and then she kind of complained about that. But I think they misjudged her as some other ship. Yeah, big white cross or big red cross on the side of your ship. Yeah,
that happens more than it should. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on so we can get this thing going. This is the genesis of the Granville Raid. All right, I'm going to summarize this for you. You see that landing craft picture? That's the ubiquitous Higgins boat. Well, 5 German POWs on the 20th of December got a hold of one of those. They were down there acting as translators on the quay side at Granville.
Okay.
And there was this LCVP just happened to be tied up right there, and it was unoccupied and loaded with fuel. And so they managed to kind of just ease aboard, and they went right out. This from the inner harbor, which you'll see a picture of. They went through the lock. An Army officer kind of waved to them as they were going, and then they escaped. By the time the radar picked it up and reported back to Granville, hey, you got a vessel that just left. Anything scheduled to leave? No. So they sent those 2 ships on the right after her. But she got a big head start, and she made it to, I'm probably going to butcher this, Minquier, how do you say that?
Oh, sorry.
La Minquiers. They're very small islands around southeast of Jersey. They were fired on, but they escaped. And interesting thing about that trawler there, that's a type of trawler you're going to see again. Those were the trawlers that were the main primary escorts for the coastal convoys that were bringing coal. And above her is PC 1233. That's the ship you're going to find out was supposed to be in Granville the night that it was raided.
Okay.
But she had developed some problems, and they swapped with PC 564. And so that letter that you saw in the very beginning is a letter from one of the survivors who had survivor's guilt about that, because he always felt ashamed that his ship was supposed to be there in PC 564, and they lost so many people. So that's the beginning. Now these people, they escaped back to the island, and they're telling General von Schmettau and his staff, "Hey, these Granville, they don't have hardly any defenses. This is the schedule of the coal ships when they're coming and going. We could easily slip in there and do a raid." And so they started to plot the raid. All right. So that's the impetus of how it began, how it got in the mind of the Germans to do this. I love that map. It's actually a period map of the port of Granville. And then I put those pictures around. I got these from Jersey Bunkers Tour. Thank you again, Phil Merritt, for allowing me to share these. And I put there, it's all about coal. Nick Stewart wrote Coastal Convoys. And I learned a great deal about Coastal Convoys when I read his book. He did an excellent presentation a couple years ago about that. And he mentions the Granville Raid in the very last few chapters of the book, because it happened in 1945.
Right.
And when the Allies captured Granville, I don't know why, but they decided to destroy these fortifications. And I often wonder, had they not done so and they had remanned them and rearmed them, maybe they could have prevented this raid, but I don't know. Things that make you go,
Yeah, I mean, I can understand why not. And yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to say it's becoming, it's over, but you know what I mean? They're in that mindset of things are wrapping up, so why bother? Yeah.
So I don't know if y'all can see very well on the southern part of that peninsula where Granville is. That's the outer and inner port. All right.
Yeah, right.
And then on top is, they call it a hut. That's the high ground. The high part of the village is there. Those dark buildings in black, those are where the military barracks was. And then to the north of there's those kind of shallows, shoals.
Yeah.
Where there's one open spot just to the southwest of where that big T is. That's kind of an open beach area. And then that's going to become an important part of the raid. To the east of there is the lower village. And I would love to go there someday. I hope to go and visit. It's a beautiful little seaside town. Any questions on that?
No, I think we're good for now.
James asks how you pronounce Springfield. Springfield. I have no idea.
I'm not going to try. No clue. I have no idea.
I'm having so much fun. Y'all are great. All right. So here is the beginning of the first attempt. There was a first attempt at the Granville Raid. The gentleman in the upper left is Major General Guy von Schmettau. He was the commander of the Commandant of the Islands and also the commander of the reinforced 319th Wehrmacht Infantry Division. All right. He'd been on that island for quite a long time. All right. But with this information he got from these POWs that came back, he wanted to put a raid together. So he got with his staff and they made a plan, a good plan. And then they started selecting volunteers from the Wehrmacht soldiers and the Kriegsmarine to start training as commandos. All right. And then you can see they were moved and accommodated at La Chalet Hotel in Parmain Lane, Guernsey. Allied intelligence intercepts had picked up that the men were given special commando training. So Ultra, I'm going to say it 3 times. Ultra, Ultra, Ultra.
I don't know
That's the actual Ultra report where they picked up on this.
Yeah.
But they kind of never pieced it together what was going on with it. They're probably scratching their heads like, why are they doing this?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, true. Yeah.
Okay, then they were transferred to Jersey in Gorey Harbor. And they waited for a high tide condition, and it happened to be on the night of 6 and 7 February at 11:30 p.m. So they left, but the weather was bad. And then one of the ships in one of the groups developed a problem, so that whole group turned around and went back to port. The others were sailing on and discovered, oops, we're by ourselves. So they went back. One small vessel completed her mission, though. on the last paragraph down there.
Yeah.
An E-boat, S-112, was supposed to go to, I believe it was Saint-Malo, and drop some mines that they had captured from the Germans. And then she was supposed to come back and go by the guard ship, which happened to be a PC-552 then, and kind of say, hey, we're here. And they were going to chase after her. She was the rabbit for the rabbit hole, James.
There we go.
They were going to distract her and get her away while the rest made the raid, not knowing that everybody else had gone back. So now we're ready to go to the next slide. All right, this here on the left is the official war diary I found about that incident. On the right, that's another sister ship of my grandfather's ship. All right, PC-552. And then below is a representation. I couldn't find the actual photo of S-112, but that's what she looked like. Now, they were fast, 25 knots.
Oh, yeah.
When the fastest a PC could go was, what, 20 knots at max speed?
Yep.
And they chased her, and it's kind of like, when you read that, it's kind of like reading one of those old novels, you know, of the days of sail when they're having a chase.
Yep.
You know? They managed to land a few rounds near her, but she just pulled away.
Yeah, they're
but
fast.
In the process, she damaged one of her engines.
Oh, okay.
See, that comes into play
when
she makes the actual raid. So this is very interesting to read that stuff. I mean, it's a little dry reading, but for a person with an active imagination like mine, you know.
Yeah, you got to do a little bit of work, but it's great stuff.
So now here's this gentleman in the center. That is a picture of one Admiral Hofmeyer. Okay. He had been on the island since June of 1944. And you think of what? He was probably the admiral in charge of the Kriegsmarine detachments there, the flotilla. But he was under von Schmettau. But as the war went on and Hitler started to lose more and more confidence in his Wehrmacht generals, I think he started thinking that General von Schmettau was being a little bit too easy on the Channel Islanders. And he wasn't aggressive enough. And I think after the failure of the first raid, I can see this Hofmeyer fella radioing back, talking to Admiral Dunitz and his staff, saying, hey, this guy is not aggressive. I could have done a better job on that raid, because that's the kind of guy he was. He's very ambitious. So they decided to relieve General von Schmettau. And they did it kind of in a dastardly way, in my opinion, a dishonorable way. They shipped him out, put this other admiral in charge of the islands before his other replacement even arrived. And I think they arranged it that way because he wanted to make the next raid. That's my opinion.
Right.
So I'm going to do a little reading here because this is kind of interesting. He was not well liked in the Navy. A man of dangerous machinations, a dedicated Nazi, an ambitious man of unstable character, of great eloquence, a master of rhetoric, sounding a little bit like Goering to me. He belongs to that category of Nazi who are so carried away and bemused with their own oratory that they can never be reckoned to be dealing honestly with themselves and with others. All right. He came from a family of Protestant pastors, and spoke with evangelical fervor, but his God was Adolf Hitler. I changed that a little bit. All right. He was very keen to impress his Nazi high command. As a matter of fact, he had been to the Kriegsmarine version of the Nazi officer training course or whatever it was, like a political indoctrination.
Yeah.
And he also had been the captain before of the battlecruiser Scharnhorst, where his greatest achievement was running her aground.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they took him off that ship and made an admiral out of him. You know, if you screw up, promote the guy out of the job.
Yep, that's how
they call it screw up and move up when I was.
Fail upwards. Yeah.
Right. All right, so here we go. This is a breakdown of the actual raid that went forward. Now, there were 5 separate groups, and you're going to see a breakdown in the next photo of them. You can see S-112 included in Group 1A now. She's no longer running all over creation.
Yeah.
She's part of the main task group that's going to go in and land the troops at demolish the port and try to capture the ship. Then there was a second group of minesweepers that would lay outside the outer harbor, and they would provide fire support, keeping the enemy pinned down while the raid's going on. Group 2, that's the group that my grandfather's ship will eventually run into. They would draw off the guard ship, all right, and then after they either sunk her or got her rid of her, they were going to try to bombard the Grand Chaussée lighthouse. All right, so they're called Artillerieträger, which means, or Artilleriefahrtschiffe, which is like artillery ferry. They're pretty deadly, and you're going to see that when you see the photos of them. Group 3, now this is where I've read this in various accounts. This is not the only account from Jersey Web. They were to meet with French collaborators.
Right.
You're saying, why would there be French collaborators in 1945? Well, I think when the Germans occupied Granville, I think they were treating them better than, and I love my American citizens, fellow citizens, but a lot of Americans, they treat foreign countries like they own them. And I think that the French were resenting the Americans being there. Okay? Yeah. It was great when they were getting liberated, because it was Third Army that came through and liberated Granville. Yeah. But I think there were some troops that were, I think, a National Guard unit from Louisiana that were part of the crew manning there, and they were never frontline troops. They were, the only jobs they ever had was rear area protection and guarding the POWs. Yeah. I think they just weren't treating the people well. They tried to help the Germans out. Don't know that for sure. I'm going to try to track that down more.
Yeah.
All right. Then there was these harbor protection vessels. Those are like fast moving boats, and they were going to launch the small raiding party that was going to try to capture some officers. Then you had another support group, and that's a breakdown on the bottom of their actual raiding detachments. You had Wehrmacht and Naval Assault Group. They even had a Luftwaffe flak crew.
Yeah.
So I have a vision in my mind of these guys pushing a 4-barrel 20mm gun around the port. I don't know. Why they would have a 6-man Luftwaffe crew, I don't know.
Because they had it?
Yeah.
That'd be my assumption.
Okay, these are some pictures I found in that after the battle, and I encourage people to download that if they're interested. Michael Gins wrote a fantastic article, and that's where I got a lot of my information and these pictures, as well as from some Jersey tours. The Hafenschutzboot up on the top, that's the 3 small vessels used to land the rubber boats with the men that were going to raid the hotels. To the right is the Artillerieträger. There's 3 of them there. Those are the actual 3 that engaged PC 564.
Okay.
Now, they don't look like much, but if you look closely, each one of them has 2 88mm cannons housed in a gun shield. Yeah. There is 2 quad 20mm guns, and there were numerous other 20mm single. There was a 37mm mount somewhere. They had 20mm of armor, which was reinforced with 100mm of concrete. Yeah. All right. Below are the Minenschutzboot. I don't know if I'm saying that. Andreas helped me out. But those are your minesweepers. Now there was 4 of those, but those are 3 of them. Those vessels had 105mm guns and numerous 20 and 37mm guns as well.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
Okay,
wow.
So that gives you an idea of what they look like. And there's your famous rubber dinghy. I love it.
Yeah. We'll go to the shore. Yep.
All right. This is a map. I love this picture I got from the Jersey Tours Granville Raid site. Now, the AFs up there in the upper right corner, that's not the position that they actually were. They were actually south of Granville or Ile de Chaussée, however you want to say it, engaging PC 564. You can see the tide has run out.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. This is taken, I think, not long after the battle. They had a neap tide that night. So M412 ended up going aground. So the Germans had to abandon her after the raid. And you can see the barracks in the center at the top of the rock. They call it a hut. And you can see how close those ships came in.
Yeah.
And those 4 minesweepers and that S112, they put so much fire down, there was really not much the soldiers in those barracks could do except hunker down behind a wall.
Yeah.
All right. Then there's the inner harbor to the left or west of there, and those are the positions of the 5 collier ships that were in port that night. All right. One, the Esquid, would be captured. How they got her through that narrow dock, I don't know, but they did. They got her just in time, but the others were badly damaged. And then you can't see it in this photo, but there's a lot of damage to the port that we'll talk about. Over to the left, you see the raiding party in the rubber boats there below the hotels. And there's the 3 fast boats and the support group number 4. So I think that's a great graphic.
That's amazing.
Kind of lays it out pretty easy for us.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Any questions on that?
Nope, just all taking it in.
All right, we're moving along pretty good. Okay, this here is a kind of breakdown of the order of things at Granville right prior to the raid coming in. And you can see on the 8th, about just before 10, they got a radar plot about 22 miles away from Catbird, which was the code name for the radar station at Cotonville. They started tracking these people, and they started to notify. All right, Cotonville. They notified the army that there was a raid coming in, so they could start preparing to get ready to reinforce if they needed to. Okay, they called the Granville port director and notified them that they saw these targets moving at 8 knots, about a little bit right before 10. And PC 564 was instructed to notify HMS Pearl, which is that trawler you'll see. All right, and instruct her to guard the gem, and you're going to see that again and again. There's a reason I'm bringing that up. The Army unit, which is a detachment from the 3rd Battalion, about company size, they were notified. All right. And there was also a French infantry company there in those barracks, too.
Okay.
For some reason, they decided, let's throw a couple PT boats in there from Cherbourg. They ended up turning around. You'll see them going back because they thought, oh, my God, this is a diversion. They're going to attack Cherbourg. Right. With a bunch of minesweepers. They're going to attack a major French port.
Yeah.
Never understood why that happened. All right. And then as you go through this, you can see further down Major Brown, who was a commanding officer of Subport T411. There were some German POWs, about 79 of them were working, doing final unloading of the ships in the inner harbor.
Right.
All right. At first, he was told to order them back to the stockade. And this is where I think some collaboration might have come in. All of a sudden, in the middle of that, they would say, hold them up. Don't send them back yet. All right. And then, because this raid might be coming in, and then they ended up sending them back to the docks right before the raid came in. That's really odd. I don't know.
That's very strange. Yeah.
And then, of course, you see where the 2 PT boats were ordered to return to Cherbourg.
Yeah.
So I put that in there because this is right before the raid comes in. And at 2400, that Major Brown asked if this was an alert. This is probably is, and enemy targets are coming in fast. At this point, 79 German POWs had arrived in the harbor for work duty. So they were there working. They were told to go back, and they were sent back. Strange. So that leads us to the next slide when you are ready. This here is the actual downloaded report that Lieutenant Sandell made. I found in the National Archives. All right, and I'm going to, instead, because that's probably too small to read, I'm going to kind of like, if you don't mind, I'm going to read from the actual report.
Yeah,
sure. I want you to advance to the next slide if you can.
Yep. All
right. This map to the right, this chart was drawn by one of the officers after the battle, and it's a graphic showing kind of the schematics of the fighting. You can see HMT Pearl. And in that small rectangular area, that's called the anchor area. That's where she was, and she was guarding one of the vessels that she had transported over from England, and they were waiting for the next favorable time. You could only go into Granville 2 times a day. All right. And PC 564, that's her patrol line that's going north-south between the two lighthouses. Well, she gets this message. She comes over there and she signals HMT Pearl. And then she headed due west. And those are the targets that they were tracking out there to the southwest of Ile de Chassé. All right. And down below is the Concale, and that's the peninsula where they ended up on the rocks after the fighting. So just want to set that up. Next slide, if you would.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to read, while I'm reading these, we're going to reference these photos, okay? 8th of March, 22:30 hours, while in the vicinity of the Videkoch buoy, PC 564 was informed to stand by for a message from the Granville Tower. At 22:44 hours, she received this message that there was a target, Charlie Z3, at 22 miles. Target moving southeast 8 knots. If Prep Easy Overcome Love, that was the code name for HMT Pearl, arrives, warn her to guard the collier SS Jim. You stand by for appropriate action. There is sufficient water east of Chassé if necessary, because it was coming on a low tide. PC 564 then closed to about 500 from the Pearl, 500 yards, and sent a signal lamp message. Unidentified radar contacts west of Chassé. Stand by to protect the collier. The Pearl acknowledged this message and responded, "Your light is too bright." That was a cheeky bugger.
Yeah.
Like that response. At this time, approximately 3,000 yards south of the buoy, PC 564 set a course due west at full speed, 18 knots. They went to general quarters and in consultation with the XO, Lieutenant Page, began a radar plot. Lieutenant Sandell then ordered speed reduced to 1/3, which is about 10 knots, in order to meet the contact. He was trying to time the meeting so they'd be just west of that island.
Right.
All right.
Right.
As it got closer, 8,000 yards, okay, they saw the contacts, the 3 contacts. They thought it was 2 at first. All right. And Lieutenant Klinger asked the gunnery officer permission to illuminate. Lieutenant Sandell ordered illumination about 0013, which is 13 minutes after midnight. And he ordered a spread of 3, and they were about a degree or so apart. Soon after illuminating the target with 2 spreads, he ordered right standard rudder. At 3,500 yards, he orders the 3-inch gun to open fire. It fired 1 round. Soon after that, the ship had started its turn. She received a hit on the port forward pilot house. In the pictures, that's the upper left. Look at the size of that hole. I could fit my head through that easily.
Oh, yeah.
An 88 millimeter round does to 5/16" steel.
Yep.
All right. This round killed or wounded everyone in the pilot house, including the XO.
Wow. Okay.
All right. Now, inside that pilot house is probably big. There's probably about a medium-sized kitchen. All right, so you can imagine the carnage.
Yeah.
The compass and gyro repeater were destroyed.
Wow.
Lieutenant Sandell, still above on the flying bridge, continued to call orders to the pilot house, unaware of the extent of the situation. Noting the ship was continuing to turn to starboard, he went below and discovered that no one was able to man the wheel. So he had to man it himself. All right. As soon as he left the flying bridge, the ship received a hit astern of the small ship's boat about 6 feet forward of the 40 millimeter gun. Picture number 2 to the upper right. All right. You can see where the round split that boat in half, and you can see the shrapnel damage. All right. This killed or injured every man in that gun crew. I believe that's where my grandfather was stationed.
Okay.
He was initially wounded from that. Not bad enough where it took him out, but he was wounded.
Right.
At the same time, a hit was received on the mast, about 7 feet above the deck, lower left. So it's 3rd hit. That one's like an aerial burst. So it killed or wounded all the men on those 20 millimeter guns.
Yeah.
There's no armor. There's no even gun shield.
Yeah. Nothing.
All right. So at this time, the ship received another hit on the starboard main deck. Remember, she's going in a circle now.
Yeah.
So if you look on the 4th, the one in the middle on the bottom, 4th hit, that went plunging into the officer's wardroom on the.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Started a fire, and they got it put out in about 5 minutes. All right. Now, meanwhile, there's fires going on in the oil house too. They had to put out.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
Okay.
Jeez.
So, as we said, being almost surrounded. All right. At first, they were being fired on by 20 and 37 millimeter guns. He finally was being relieved at the wheel. He ordered radical course changes to try to get out of the range of the guns. With most of his gun positions knocked out, many casualties, and confusion, he initially ordered the engines stop and to stand by to abandon ship. Remember,
Okay.
this officer has never been in command of this ship before, and he's probably never trained to be under fire like this.
Right.
So I think he was thinking, man, we got to get off the ship or to sink us all.
Right.
During this confusion, 15 sailors stationed on the fantail released a life raft. All they heard was abandoned ship. They never had to stand by. And it was chaos back there. All right. They threw a life raft over there, and 15 sailors, including my grandfather, jumped in the water. The lieutenant didn't know this at the time. So
right.
At that time, he decided again, after consulting with Lieutenant Klinger, that let's get the ship moving again. So again, he moves the ship, and then he orders to stop and abandon ship again. Finally, Lieutenant Klinger, probably being rather insistent, said, "Sir, we've got to get the heck out of here, or they're going to sink the ship or capture it, or both." And so he was like, okay, he finally convinced them to head south. So they ran for all their life's worth, and they ended up going ashore at that place I indicated on the map near Concau. Yep. Now, the ship was badly damaged below water because it was very rocky. All right. Right. So Lieutenant Duval, okay, ashore with a couple of personnel, and they went and found a French doctor and a French officer, and they sent some fishing boats, got the wounded off, and tended them, and then they arranged for a tow the next day, and she was towed initially to Saint-Malo. So I wanted to, before we move on from these pictures, the one in the upper right, you can see the opposite view of that boat. How if that had missed and hit those jet charge racks, the whole stern of that ship would have blown right off.
Yep.
So that's how lucky they were there. Okay, there's this. I call that one lucky sailor, that one on the bottom right. I don't think he was wearing that, but maybe he thought it would be nice to take a picture of that.
Yeah, maybe
he would be alive.
Yeah.
So that picture, the fallen, that's looking into the boat. Now, if you look very carefully in those two pictures, you see sacks.
Yep.
And it took me a while to identify them, but I finally looked at one closely and I said, that's a body.
Yep.
So that's where they initially put the killed.
Yep. Until
they could arrange burial at sea or whatever they were going to do. So I thought that would be dramatic as I was reading this to see that. All right.
Yeah, so, definitely is.
Yeah. So we could talk a little about the damage. We see the 1.5 foot hole through the pilot house, mast damaged by shrapnel. She had a shell through the deck at the base of the pilot house. Minor damage to the 40 millimeter gun. Depth charge release gear inoperative. Steam lines broken. Electrical cables cut. Shell exploded in a small boat. And then she damaged her rudder, both rudders, both props, and a starboard strut shaft when she went aground. But she lived. And at least about half the crew had been killed or wounded or more. But they got out of the way. And the Germans, I don't know why they didn't follow up and head east. And they could have probably captured the Jim. It would have definitely overwhelmed the trawler. But for some reason, they went back and tried to bomb this lighthouse. They followed their orders.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we could go back a couple of slides. Can you go back?
So you want to go back? Yeah.
For a few. I know we're getting long in time. I'm trying to get done. So I want to bring up about Pro. There's a couple of accounts I read. The Last Raid by Will Fowler, I think. And it's mentioned there. I think it's mentioned in the Gins article after the battle. Granville kept saying they were trying to call the Pearl and tell her to go assist PC 564.
Right.
And they were like almost implying cowardice, like they didn't want to do it. I think Granville was having trouble talking to anyone because power went out several times. And it might have been around the same time they were trying to radio the Pearl. but for some reason she never got the message. But I got thinking, I said, what is the Admiralty orders for this ship? She's an escort. They're supposed to stay with their escorts. Okay, they're not obligated to take orders from the U.S. Navy.
True.
And her last instructions were guard the gem. And I think that's what her captain did. All right. And I just want to bring that up because
no, that's a good thing to bring up. Yeah, for sure.
They think that she was ignoring and not answering.
Right. Yeah.
So I just want to defend the British captain of that ship. I think he was following his orders exactly like he was supposed to. I need to find if I can get some Admiralty records on what the actual policies were.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure that's available, but yeah.
I'm hoping that I've made contact with Jim Carter, who wrote a great book. I'm reading Hearts of Steel because he wrote a similar book about his great grandfather.
Yeah, it was on Woody's channel. Yeah,
and he's trying to reach out and help me with some links, so I might be able to find more information. So,
that's awesome.
If he's watching today, thanks. Okay, we can go on now. We're trying to get near the end here. Okay, right there. This is the not after action. This is the report of my grandfather where they discovered him at sea, and those are representations of the 3 British ships that were on patrol the next day. Oh, hi, Jim.
There we go.
Cheers, mate. And anyway, that ship above, that's the sister ship. I couldn't find an actual picture of HMS Ilfracombe. That's the main ship that took my grandfather's body aboard. And then the one below was I think that's a Flower class Corvette. I'm pretty sure.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's HMS.
Yeah. Yep.
She was actually a picture I found for Narcissus, and then below is an actual picture of HMS Harsborough. All right, and that's the actual report where they found him. They identified him by his identification disc, his description, and they noticed he had a wound in his head.
Okay.
And so they buried him at sea, and I actually have the coordinates where he was buried, just south of the Ile de Chaussee. So one day I hope to take a ferry and maybe drop a wreath.
Yeah, that would be.
I'll see if I can do that someday.
That would be fantastic to do.
So there's something I wanted to read real quick.
Yep, of course.
I read this in Margaret Ginn's article, who wrote some real good articles about the Channel Islands. She got to interview a lot of the 14 men that were captured, because that's what happened. They were out on this life raft, and the Germans saw them in the water. Okay, electrician Ed Thomas, who describes himself as a skinny little redhead with a face full of freckles, just coming off the 20 to 2400 hours watch when general quarters was sounded. When action began, the electrical panel lit up, so he knew that there was a short circuit somewhere aboard. He was pulling switches like mad when the captain came down and told him to get his behind out of there because she was going down. Well, there's an indication to me that Lieutenant was kind of losing it.
Yep.
I mean, no disrespect. He's a brave man. I just wanted to say what this eyewitness says. Ed obeyed orders and remembers that when he jumped in the water, it was very cold and the small life raft was upside down.
Okay.
He prayed in English, Polish, and being an ex-altar boy in Latin as well. He can't remember how long he was hanging onto the raft with the others, but he felt that if it didn't come soon, help didn't come soon, it would be his last bath. And he had a little flashlight with him, a little torch, as the British would say. He flashed an SOS. The Germans saw that, all right, and they responded with a shower of tracers. So they thought they were being fired at, so they fired a burst. That is the burst that I think a stray round struck my grandfather in the head. I'm not 100% sure. My cousin Paul spoke with some of the survivors, and they really didn't want to talk about it. They said it was a bad night and it was a bad memory. Yep. And even one said, "Please don't call again." And I understand, and he respected that. But I think this is circumstantial evidence of how my grandfather was killed. Anyway, and eventually the Germans came along and they pulled all those 14 survivors aboard, and they went to the Channel Islands for the next 6 weeks until the war ended. Yeah. So that's the story of my grandfather's death in my mind's eye.
Yep, makes sense to me.
Okay, this is after the raid. Now the German raiding party came in there, and in about an hour or more, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, they did all this damage. Okay.
Wow.
They damaged 4 of the freighters, captured the Estwood, but they didn't get much coal out of her, maybe 400 or 600 tons. Remember, she was being unloaded the night before.
Yeah.
Okay, they damaged about one quay. They damaged, I think, 3 or 4 of the cranes. Some could be operated, some were badly damaged and would require different days to repair.
Yeah.
The big crawlers, you can see them, those blacked out hulks that look like cranes on crawlers. They damaged 3 of those. And the big 22 Kearing, I think that's Kearing, probably a type of crane. Only one day, but it's in bad condition. And of the stiff leg there, they destroyed about half of them. So they put this site out of action for maybe 2 days, but she didn't ever. It took months before she was there to full capacity. So it was an effective raid, and they did repatriate some of the prisoners, about 65 of them.
Yeah.
Some of them didn't want to go back.
I believe that.
They were having it pretty good in France. They didn't want to go back.
Yeah.
And then they escaped. And by the time the army arrives later, just as they were leaving, like the cavalry came, but it wasn't in the nick of time this time. They were already gone. They were halfway to Saint Helier before they got back. So.
Yeah, sounds like something out of a movie almost.
Right. So was it a good raid? I think so. But let's go forward. Unless there's any questions about that.
There's a well, they might be better towards the end if.
Okay, we're almost done, folks. Almost done.
Yeah.
Granville Raid. This is the pictures of the 2 hotels. Those are beautiful. I want to go there and visit sometime. But that's where the American officers and British officers were being housed. Okay. In the confusion, this other raiding party comes in there. They get up on top of the bluffs there, and they go in there and they capture some U.S. officers, 4 of them. All right. Unfortunately, there's a Royal Navy Reserve officer named Lieutenant F.R. Lightoller, and he was killed. He was trying to get to the radio shack to send a message back, probably to England. Yeah. And they shot him down as he was heading there. All right, so he was a British officer that was killed. And another thing they did, they were firing indiscriminately to cause confusion in the town, and they believe that was when most of the civilians were killed. You know, some people just looking out like, what's going on, and then they got killed.
Then you get hit. Yeah.
Right. So here is the final tally of the casualties, the butcher's bill, as they say.
Yep.
PC 564. You can see 14 KIA and 11 wounded, and then 14 MIA. So that's over almost 60% of the crew. All right. And I want to point out one name here on that list. If you go below where my grandfather's listed in the middle, where is he at? Daniel G. Riley, Radio Man 3rd Class. This was in 1943. Now, I got to bring us back just a little. It's going to be quick. They were in a hurricane off the coast of South Carolina. It's hurricane season. And 3 men went overboard that night. 1 was washed overboard and never seen again. Another sailor was washed overboard by one wave, and another wave washed him back on board, and they grabbed him. And this poor guy, Daniel G. Riley, was washed overboard. He was still afloat. He must have had a life vest on, and they managed to see him in the waves, and they got a lifeline out to him. It took an hour or more to get the ship maneuvered close enough in the waves where they could pull him aboard, but they pulled him aboard. And I thought it was poignant because they saved his life, and just a few years later, he died.
Yep.
Kind of sad.
That's war.
And in the middle, I put the British casualties, and I want to call attention to the 2 photos there on the left. That's Lieutenant Frederick R. Lightoller, all right, DSC, Royal Navy Reserve. Below is his father. Have you all seen the movie, the I think it was 2008 Dunkirk movie.
Yeah.
There's a family that takes a small boat. That's that father and son. Okay. Now, I've learned in my research that Charles Lightoller was the last surviving officer on the Titanic for World War One. He went through World War One as a naval officer in the Royal Navy, got out of the Navy after the war was over, and then joined the Navy again in World War Two. And I think it's just so sad he lost his son 6 weeks before the war ended.
Yep.
Very sad. And then you've got the missing over there, and one of the missing was a civilian. He was working for the United Nations. Yeah, John Alexander.
Oh, yeah. There, yeah.
And then below that, there's the U.S. Army personnel that were U.S. personnel that were on Granville. There was one Major Ben Ritter, okay, and 22 wounded U.S. Navy personnel that were part of the port, and 5 MIA, and those were those 5 people that were brought to the Channel Islands. And up to the right is the French civilians that were killed, 6 killed and 8 wounded, including 2 children. And all this, the German raid cost them three casualties, a Lieutenant Sosi, and 2 Oberfeldwebel, and an Obergefreite, and 15 wounded, and 1 MIA. So pretty low price to pay for a successful raid.
Yeah, especially given the time of the war.
Now, you can go on the website, and they did a great job of memorializing these people. They show all the gravestones where the British. And I want to say this: all those British casualties, most of those were merchantmen. They fought like heck to save their ships. They did not go down easy. All right, they gave up some lives, even though the Germans were. They destroyed some of their ships and captured one. So I just want to hats off to the British tars.
Oh yeah,
they're always brave in the fight. And this is a memoriam to my grandfather. To the left, that's Agawam, Massachusetts. My cousin Paul was he wanted to honor my grandfather so much that even though we don't have a body to put in the grave, he arranged to have a headstone placed there in the military cemetery. Memorial cemetery, I'm sorry. And then over to the middle, that's the wall of the missing, they call it, at the Montjoie Saint Martin in Brittany. That's where my grandfather has his name on the wall of the missing. And there's my cousin Carrie. That was my Uncle Raymond's daughter, one of his daughters. She went over there to visit. And it's a beautiful cemetery, which the French do such a great job of keeping our cemeteries up, both the Commonwealth, Indian, and U.S. cemeteries. So that's my presentation. And the next slide is conclusions and questions.
Perfect. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, still with us, that'd be great. That was fantastic. Thanks, Dave. That was
a little bit longer than an hour and a half, but
that's all good. Yeah, sorry, I'm just taking it all in. Yeah, this is fantastic. The depth of research is amazing.
Andres, I need to practice my German more.
Yeah,
I used to speak a little when I was in the Army, but I forgot.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, we just have 2 questions right now. Scott is asking if you have a copy of the service record in its entirety, I guess.
Yes, matter of fact, I wrote to that same administration, and they sent me digital copies of most of what my cousin Paul has. So I do.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
And I just didn't have time to swap out they're better quality photos, but I didn't have to swap them out.
Yeah, they won't be in the page protectors.
But they'll if I include them, they'll be in the book I hope to write.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Another one, I don't think there was, but was there any retaliation for the raid?
No, there wasn't. Although Churchill was always wanting to retake the islands from the beginning.
Yes. Yep.
And, if you read that the last raid, most of that is talking about the commando raids that were either successful or mostly not successful on the Channel Islands. But no, there was no retaliation. I think they were a bit embarrassed by it myself. They got surprised and they knew it.
Yeah, probably.
I think bombarding the Channel Islands was like a no-no because they didn't really want to. It would have hurt a lot of innocent people.
Yeah, I wouldn't have done anything other than kill
And
civilians.
unfortunately, there was a reason we had to do it in France. This would have been like hardly any reason to do that.
It wouldn't have made a difference. Yeah,
for very little gain.
That's why they just left it alone. I don't think it would have made much sense. Yeah, so I don't think there's any other questions. That was extremely thorough in the best way possible. So, yeah, sorry, I'm just thinking about all that, and I already went through the slides before, but yeah, still taking that in. You said you want to turn this into a book. Any plans in that direction?
Well, I have the outline complete.
Perfect.
I have enough to write the chapters from about March of 1944 all the way to the end. What I'm wanting to find, I have a very detailed knowledge of where the ship was during her first 18 or 19 months. I literally have the war diaries from every convoy she escorted, so I could even track them on a map.
Yeah.
And places she stopped when she was training, but I don't have any personal anecdotes to flesh out that time frame.
I see what you mean.
Not enough. I want to find if I can get in touch with some family members. Maybe there is an archive in Bay City, Michigan, which I hope to visit this spring. It's the Bay City Maritime Museum, and that's the repository of the PC Sailors Association archives. And there's a lot of articles that were written by the crew members there. So
there's got to be
find that.
There's got to be something in there. I mean, it's so much is done, right? Because of the.
I may go on Facebook and maybe put some information out there. You know, hey, PC 564 veteran families, please contact me. I'm not sure. You can put my email address, please, in the links below, and I'd love to hear from anyone who can help me.
Yeah, I definitely will. And sometimes you never know, right? Comments come up later on, and we can always do that if people don't reach out themselves. Like, very happy to be a conduit between people to do this, and done it in the past. So happy to do it and get more information shared.
And good luck on your upcoming trip to Normandy. We're all excited.
Yes. Yeah. It's not going to this side, unfortunately, too far, but I'll just have to go back.
Yeah. Oh, and tell Andreas and everyone, I am a Braves and a Red Sox fan.
Oh, it hurts my heart as a Toronto fan.
Oh, sorry.
That's double painful. Wow. Yeah. So other than that, yeah. And Andreas said, "Where'd you go? Another book to buy." Yeah. So we are all pulling for you to do this.
You got time to save for that one, Andreas, because it'll be a while before it gets out.
Yeah, it's got some work to. Yeah, it's not a quick process, but yeah. So other than that, yeah. Thanks to everyone for coming out. Thanks, Dave, for coming on. I'm still taking all that in. That's a lot of information. Again, in the best way possible to do this story. I think you did it in a great way with that personal angle. I mean, that's the stuff I love. So. Thanks for that.
It did affect my family greatly because I saw how it affected my mother and her siblings, and my grandmother had to remarry, and it wasn't a successful marriage really. And anyway, that's the personal cost of a casualty in war.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's an often repeated story that doesn't get told, unfortunately. But
one day we'll learn not to fight anymore.
Well, I hope so. We're trying, seem to be going the other direction. Anyway, other than that, everyone, thanks for coming out. One more live stream is scheduled for now. We're having Chris back to do Archer Part 2, I guess we'll call it. Before I take. Yeah, that should be good. We're going to do all the pieces we missed, I guess. Yeah, so it'll be great. So other than that, not much else is planned until I go. And I don't know. We'll see how I do stuff from the ground, but I'm probably trying to do quite a few. But other than that, everyone else, enjoy your weekend. Rest of your weekend. I'll see everybody next time. And thanks again, Dave. See everybody.
Everybody, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see everybody next weekend. Bye.
Bye now.